Hi, welcome back. Today we're going to be, I'll just read Sutra 12 again, and then we'll move on to 13. 12. Abhyasa Vairagya tan nirodha. Their suppression is brought about by persistent practice and non-attachment. 13 is Tatra sthitau yatno abhyasa. Yatno abhyasa. Abhyasa is the effort for being firmly established in the state of Citta Vritti nirodha. What is abhyasa? All effort directed toward the attainment of that transcendent state in which all Citta Vrittis have been suppressed and the light of reality shines uninterruptedly in its fullest splendor. The means of attaining this objective are many and various, and all these may be included in abhyasa. It is true that in this particular system of yoga put forth by Patanjali, only 8 kinds of practices have been included, and hence it is called Ashtanga yoga, or, in other words, yoga with 8 component parts. And we'll get into all that. But there are other systems of yoga prevalent in the East, and each has its own particular technique. Many practices are common, but there are some which are peculiar to each system. Patanjali has included in his system practically all those which are essential or important. The yogi can adopt any of these according to his needs or temperament, though he is generally advised to confine himself to those practices which are prescribed in the particular school to which he belongs. It need hardly be pointed out that yoga is an experimental science, and as in all sciences, new techniques are being constantly discovered by individual teachers and taught to their disciples. Thus, each advanced teacher, though he follows the broad principles of yoga and techniques of his particular school, imparts a personal touch to his teachings by introducing certain minor practices of his own. These are generally continued in a more or less modified form as long as the school lasts. But in most cases, such schools quickly degenerate into mere academic bodies, carrying on a dead tradition. That was 13. Now let's go to 14. Okay, I don't know if I'm going to be able to pronounce this one. Sa tu dīrgha-kāla-nairantarya-satkāra-āsevito dṛḍha-bhūmiḥ. That indeed for long time with uninterrupted continuance incessantly and reverent devotion, earnestness, pursued, practiced, followed, continued, firm ground. It, abhyasa, becomes firmly grounded on being continued for a long time without interruption and with reverent devotion. In order that the practice of yoga may bear fruit and may enable the sadhaka to be firmly established on the path, there are 3 conditions which must be fulfilled. These conditions, as defined in this sutra, are 1. These practices must be continued for a long time. 2. There should be no interruptions. 3. The path must be trodden with devotion and in a spirit of reverence. The necessity for pointing out these conditions will be seen if one takes into account the enormous number of failures on this path. The path of yoga appears very fascinating in the beginning, and many are the people who are caught by its glamour and make a start in the hope of plucking its fruit in a very short time. But alas, of those who enter the path, only a microscopical minority are able to make good progress. Even those who have the courage and perseverance to continue are very few in number. The vast majority of aspirants drop out sooner or later, giving up the practice completely or keeping up a semblance of mere external forms as soon as the glamour wears out. They either come to believe that it is all moonshine, or manage to convince themselves that conditions in the present life are not favorable and they had better postpone the effort to the next life when they vainly hope to be placed in better circumstances. Leaving out a few cases where karma interposes a real obstacle in the path of the aspirant, the real cause of discontinuing the practice is, in the vast majority of cases, the lack of spiritual maturity, without which no success on the path is possible. The world and its pursuits have still a great deal of attraction for such people, and they are not prepared to make the sacrifices which are demanded on this path. Coming back to the essential conditions of success, the necessity for continuing the practices for a long time is obvious. The nature of the changes which have to be brought about in our character, mind, and vehicles is such that unless the practices are continued for a long time, no appreciable improvement can be expected. Our nature has to be completely changed, and the change is so fundamental that we must be prepared to continue the work until it is finished. How long this will take will depend upon many factors: our evolutionary stage, the time we've already given to the work in previous lives, and the effort that we make in this life. Theoretically, if a man is able to surrender himself completely to Ishvara, he can pass into samadhi immediately. But it is a very big if, and the samskaras of the past will not in actual life allow him to accomplish suddenly what can be done only after a long and strenuous course of discipline. My Baba used to say, just drop it, just drop it. And it's like, okay, it sounds so easy, but it's so hard to just drop it until you get to a certain point. Then you're like, oh yeah, I can just drop it. Now I can just drop it. I had to go through all that, right, first. After a long strenuous course of discipline. In a few rare cases where the progress is extremely rapid, there is always the momentum of the past due generally to a number of successive lives devoted to the practice of yoga. So no one can predict when the final goal will be reached, and he who enters the path seriously must make up his mind to continue not only for a long time, but through many lives until the goal is reached. He who is ready for treading this path is so much absorbed in the fascinating work and has so much to do that he has no time to worry as to when he will reach the goal. If time hangs heavy on our hands and we are continually worrying when success will be ours, it shows lack of real interest and is a danger signal. To appreciate the requirement of not allowing any interruptions, we have to remember that much of the work in yoga involves bringing about very deep-seated and fundamental changes in the various vehicles through which consciousness functions on the different planes, the kosas. And success in bringing about the desired changes depends upon continuity of practice. Interruption means not only waste of so much time, but a considerable sliding back and retraversing the same ground which has already been covered. I'm really good at that. An example will make this clear. Suppose a sadhaka is trying to purify his mind. He has to exclude rigidly from his mind all impure thoughts and emotions, and to make his mental vehicle, or manomaya kosa, vibrate to the highest and purest thoughts until the ordinary coarse material of the vehicle has been completely replaced by the finest and subtlest matter which can respond to only pure and lofty thoughts and emotions. If this is accomplished, the very vibratory capacity of the vehicle is completely changed, and it becomes very difficult for the sadhaka to entertain any impure thoughts in the same way as it is difficult for a licentious person to entertain pure thoughts. But suppose he gives up the effort after making some progress, then the original conditions tend to reassert themselves gradually, and if he resumes the practice after considerable time, the process of purification has to start ab initio. Most of the required changes in our mind and character involve some changes in various vehicles, and these latter processes, which are really material, must be almost completely completed if they are to be made practically irreversible. Even in ordinary life, this continuity of practice is of importance for most undertakings. A boy who wants to make himself strong and muscular must take exercise regularly. If he does strenuous exercise but gives it up from time to time, he does not make much progress. Prolonged and steady practice is the secret of success in all such undertakings. Even interrupted practice gives some advantage and is better than no practice at all, because it creates favorable samskaras and thus strengthens tendencies in the desired direction. But when yoga is taken up seriously, uninterrupted practice is essential, and every new technique which is initiated must be practiced continuously until it is sufficiently mastered. The third condition, requiring an attitude of devotion and earnestness, is equally important. Yoga is a serious business and requires intense and wholehearted application. It cannot be pursued as a hobby, one of a number of pursuits in which we are equally interested. If a person desires success, even in a worldly pursuit like science or art, he has to give himself completely to his work. The more difficult the undertaking, the greater the devotion it demands. Now, the objective of yoga is the highest prize of human achievement, and its pursuit must necessarily be very exacting in its demand on the time and energy of the sadhaka. That is why in the olden days, people who wanted to practice yoga Let me start again. That is why in the olden days, people who wanted to practice yoga retired into forests so that they could devote themselves completely to the task. Complete retirement may not be possible or necessary, but a wholehearted devotion to the holy task is absolutely necessary. Many people think that they can combine the pursuit of worldly ambitions with yogic discipline and glibly cite the example of Janaka. But Janaka had already attained the idea of yoga before he undertook the worldly duties. The ordinary sadhaka, especially the beginner who tries to combine the two ideals, is sure to be swamped by his worldly desires and activities and to pursue the path of yoga merely in name. Circumstances and habits of past lives may not allow the sadhaka to adopt this one-pointed attitude all at once, but he must work steadily and deliberately toward this end, eliminating one by one all the activities and interests which either interfere with his main work or uselessly consume his time and energy. This capacity to throw oneself wholeheartedly and persistently into the task which the sadhaka has placed before himself is a necessary qualification and shows the readiness of the soul to embark on the divine adventure. The word satkāra also implies an attitude of trying to find The word satkāra also implies an attitude of reverence toward his task. In pursuing his idea, the sadhaka is trying to find that ultimate reality, which is the basis and the cause of the whole universe, manifest and unmanifest. This very fact that he is trying to unravel the greatest mystery of life should fill him with a sense of awe and reverence, provided he is conscious of the nature of his high purpose and the tremendous nature of the reality which he is approaching. When the three conditions mentioned in the sutra are present, progress on the path of yoga is assured. It may be slow owing to inadequate momentum from past lives, but the sadhaka is at least firmly established on the path, and the attainment of the final goal becomes only a question of time. Wonderful, right? Wow, I don't really have much commentary on that. That really said a lot. The next one is 15. Well, I'm going to have to practice that one before I try to pronounce it. The consciousness of perfect mastery of desires In the case of one who has ceased to crave for objects, seen or unseen, is vairāgya, viveka and vairāgya. Idi parabhyam. All right, so 15, we'll do that tomorrow. Thank you for joining me.